Howdy y'all, TheJTJ here with a Soulblight Gravelords Warscroll review. Today we'll be talking about Graveguard, so stick around. Alright guys, today we'll be talking about Graveguard. This is recorded before the winter FAQ, so if any of the numbers or abilities are wrong here in a month or so or a couple weeks or whatever it is, we'll try to do a revision on that. But as of today, this is all good info. All right, so looking at the Graveguard, they have 1 wound, a 4-inch move, a 5-up save, and 10 bravery. The weapons, they can be either armed with a white blade or a great white blade, and basically the difference on those two is the great blade is a 4+ to wound, while the regular blade is a 3, but the damage for that great blade is 2 instead of 1. When you're setting up your units, you can either arm them all with great blades, or you can armor them with just a white blade and a shield. One model can be a champion. Add 1 to the attack characteristic of that. The standard bearer, 1 in every 10 models. So remember, if you're bringing a 20 or a 30 block, you can have 2 or 3. Can reroll 1s for Deathless Minions battle trait, so making it a little bit better. That rerolling 1s, it does help out occasionally, so it is not something to scoff at. It'll save you a couple wounds every game. Musician, 1 in every 10 models in this unit can be a horn blower. While this unit has any horn blowers, charge rolls for this unit less than 6 are treated as 6. Very simple. You got a minimum 6-inch charge. So that kind of makes up for their slow movement. Having that guaranteed 6-inch charge is kind of nice. Abilities: Cursed Weapon. If this unmodified wound roll for attacks made with a melee weapon by this unit is 6, the target suffers 1 mortal wound in addition to any normal damage. So that's a mortal wound in addition to the normal damage. Very good. Very good. Crypt Shields. Add 1 to save rolls for attacks that target a unit armed with white blades and crypt shields. So basically the crypt shields are giving you're getting +1 to your save. So that save goes up to a 4+. The up and down with that is it's add 1. It isn't a characteristic change. If it was a characteristic change, it would make it the math on this to me a lot different on what you take. But just adding 1 to it, of course, you can always put Mystic Shield and all that defense, but you're still only really going to be ever saving at a 4-up with these guys. So, I don't love that. I wish it would have changed the characteristics. I personally think it would make the decision harder to take. We'll talk about why I like Great Blades here shortly. But the keywords we have are Death, Soulblight Gravelords, Death Rattle, Summonable, and Graveguard. Alright, so the cost is 140 points for a 10 model unit, which is a great cost. It's a very good cost. Even if it went up 10 points, maybe even 15, it'd still be really nice cost for what these guys do. Notes there: Death Rattle keyword. That goes off on a lot of stuff in the book, especially the White King abilities and different abilities in the book that affect Death Rattle. Summonable, even a better keyword. You're going to get all your heals, you're bringing models back, you're coming out of the grave. So all those juicy things that the whole book's based around. And a battle line with a White King as a general. So if you wanted to run a complete army of Graveguard, you can do that. Alright, so let's look at some damage. Alright, so basically I took a 10-mana unit and I compared the shields versus the great blades. For the shields, you're getting a max wound output of 21, and with great weapons, you're going to get 42. So you're kind of doubling up pretty much every time because it is 2 damage. However, when we look at the average wound output, you're getting 8 for shields and about 11 for great weapons. Remember, that's after you have to hit, you have to wound, and saves are taken into account. Thoughts: in a vacuum, great weapon is the way to go. Just hands down, it just has more damage output. I think that if you're just looking at it, any level, those great blades are just going to sneak in 1 and 2 more damage every turn. So it's a pretty good trade-off for the killingness over the survivability. All right, the good. There are 10 bravery, which you know the whole book is, but that's still a good thing. 6-inch charge, that's the minimum. So you're going to miss out on all that movement, but you get that 6-inch charge, and it is it's pretty nice. You know, when you can guarantee yourself that, it is good. Mortal wounds on wound rolls. That's a big deal because there's so much stuff in the book that allows you to arc off of 6s to hit. And remember, you can't stack 2 effects. Like, say, if you had 6s to hit, you can either explode or do mortal wounds. You can't pick both of them. So it's really nice having these to go off on 6s to wound. So you can still do things like a Belladonna spell that allows their 6s to explode into extra attacks. Then you can still get those to mortal wounds. Also, the mortal wounds are in addition. So that's just extra damage. That's just extra. It's not taking away. It's not just 2 mortal wounds. It's 2 mortal wounds in addition. They're a good price for what you're getting. I think they're very well costed. If you look around, especially I like to look at Cities of Sigmar for some comparable type units, and you know, way they're costed is very competitive. They have a 6-inch ward with rerolling ones. You know, if they're in position to do that, which is really good because it gives them a little bit of survivability, and you'd be surprised over the course of a game, a 20 block, how many 6s you actually do roll, how many guys you actually save, how many wounds you save with that. Great synergy in the book. So there's all sorts of places in the book to find, and we'll talk about some of them in just a second, to find you know, buffs, extra attacks, extra damage, just ways to do it. All right, the bad. They're slow. The bad armor, a 5+ isn't the worst in the world, but it's not the best. And I consider them, they're a little bit of a glass cannon. I know they have a 5-up save, and they do have, you know, can have that 6-up ward. So it's nice to have that, and it makes them not just total, you know, a glass cannon, but they tend to die in droves if anything with any killing ability sneezes at them. And I have found that they are countered by high armor targets because you can roll all these numbers out. But if you run into some liberators with a 3-up save or something with a 2-up save, you're going to get very few of those wounds through. You're depending on those mortals to get through there and do a little damage. And sometimes that might use, you know, your rolls just don't work out. So I found that high armor targets can counter them a little bit. All right, before we go any further, I sort of want to break down some damage so we can have some discussions on this. And I'm going to use a Grave Guard with Great Weapon 20 block. And you know, if you're running just the shields and the swords, you could run all these damage tables yourself. It's just basically going to be less than what you're going to see here. But I want to show you some of the ways that you can buff these guys to make them very good. So their base profile at a 20 block is, you know, 22 damage at a 4-up save. I usually look at 4-up saves because generally speaking, that's a sort of an all-comer. That's right in the middle. But let's be honest, 3-up is probably what you're going to see and run into a lot more. So 17 wounds, that's pretty good. That's killing 20 blocks. That's killing, you know, monsters. That's killing large things. So just base is pretty good. Now, if we give them an all-out attack, which is as long as they're not, you know, roared or something crazy is going on, you got the CP. That's going to bring up the damage quite a bit, an extra 5 damage on that. So right now, you're killing Archeon if he's not buffed or didn't do an all-out attack or something. So 20 wounds, beautiful. I love seeing 20 wounds at a 3-up. That's what you're trying to get to a lot of times because that's one kill. You know, that's one hit, blocks of units. That's one hitting a lot of the monsters and big scary things, the named characters in the game. You hit that 20 wound mark, you're taking them out in one go. All right, let's keep going a little bit. So extra attack. So if you give them an extra attack from the Vampire Lord, you're going to do 26 wounds. So an extra attack is given to 26 wounds. A little bit of tech to talk about with that Vampire Lord. You got the Vampire Lord. So say it's your turn, you charge in your Grave Guard. Your Vampire Lord is there to buff them, give them an extra attack, which this is showing you right here that it's a better take than the all-out attack, which is only giving you 22 damage at a 3-up. That extra attack is giving you a 26. So you're netting, 4 or 5 more damage off of that extra attack. Here's where it becomes nice, though, because remember, that effect lasts until your next hero phase. So if you go first, you do that buff, you Gary kill something, they attack. The opponent's turn, that unit's still sitting here. If your Graveguard's still sitting there in combat, you can actually throw another extra attack on, or at that point throw an all-out attack on them because that buff is just sitting there and you haven't actually given it. In fact, if you want to give that buff, you can give it a max of 3 times. Once in your phase, if you went first, once in the enemy phase. Then if they double turn you, you can do it 3 times. You can get a +3 attack on your unit, and that goes for any summonable unit that the Vampire Lord can give that out to. Now, let's be honest. One of 2 things is happening here. One, your Graveguard are going to be dead by that turn, or they're going to kill whatever is touching them by that point. So I don't think you'll ever get to that point, but just know that it is possible. And the strategy is really interesting on huge blocks of zombies, because zombies have a little bit more staying power. So if you've got a 40 or 60 block of zombies and you're giving them their extra 2 and 3 attacks, it's kind of nice. All right, so let's give them a +1 to wound from strength of the pack. That's the Vikros dynasty. If you're in that bubble of a vampire, they're going to give you that +1 to wound. And this is a great synergy, because remember, this is sort of like a passive ability. They're just getting a +1 to wound, and that's going to make up from that I don't want to say it's a -1 to wound with the great weapons, but your great weapons wound on a 4+ versus a 3-up. So if you give them a +1 to wound, it's basically just as good as giving them all-out attack. So 22 damage. All right, so then we got Under a Killing Moon with Belladama, that exploding 6s. And remember, these are exploding to hit, and then you can still do the 6s on mortal wounds. So once again, the exploding 6s right there at that 22. So basically, any of these 3 are giving you basically 22 damage at 3-up. They're all sort of comparable doing that. So you have options. You don't feel that, hey, I can only do this or I can do that. Just remember, you have options of what you want to do. All right, so let's look if you got the extra attack off with the Vampire Lord and exploding 6s. You're going to do about 33 wounds at a 3-up. Even a 2-up, you're doing about 25. So you're getting extra attacks and you're exploding 6s. That 25 number so high is because you have so many more attacks going through. They're allowing you to get those 6 mortal wounds. Those mortal wounds turn into 6s on the wounds. All right, so and I know I'm hitting you with a lot, and this will be on the website too, so I can pull this up, look it over, and take a little bit more time to see what the numbers look like. +1 to wound, plus exploding 6s, you're sitting there doing 27 damage. So you get a +1 to wound from exploding 6s and an extra attack. 30 wounds on a 2-up, 40 on that. Now, is this impossible to get these 3 buffs up? No, it's actually quite easy, because you're going to get a +1 to wound if your vampire is, if you have a Vampire Lord bubble, and he can give them the extra attack. So you're getting those 2. The exploding 6s, if you have to get that spell off of Belladama, so that becomes a little bit more tricky, but basically you've got those 2 models close enough to these guys, they'll do it. And this is the extra attack and +1 to wound, like I was saying, just with the Vampire Lord. So if you just want to run a block of 20 of these guys and a Vampire Lord off to the side, you can look to do 33 damage at a 3-up. So that's killing a lot. That's killing a lot of heavily armored units. So I know that's a lot of numbers right there. Like I said, this will be a link in the description that you can look at and sort of pour over these numbers. All right, so let's get back into the thoughts. Point for point, one of the best units in the book. Hands down, there's absolutely 0 builds that if someone I saw brought Graveguard, I'd go, oh, that doesn't work here. they are perfectly fine by themselves, and everything that you can bring in to buff them just makes them that much better. Can be battle line if you want an elite force, and it's really not that elite. You can still get a lot of models on the table running 320 blocks of these Graveguard. So elite, I would call them elite for this book, sort of, but you can still put a lot of bodies on the table. Summonable, focus the healing on them instead of your other units. So I really feel that if you've got skeletons, zombies, and Graveguard, obviously you want to heal your Graveguard because point for point, it's just a better investment. With dire wolves, depending on the situation, maybe you want one of those back. But with Graveguard, you know on that D3 that you're going to get a model back. You're going to get D3 models back, basically. Even 10 do work. When they come back, they are a real threat. So if you start with a 20 block and they get shot, they get killed, when you bring them back at the end of the battle shock phase, 10 back just in a corner popping out of a grave somewhere, that's actually a threat to kill something. Just 10 Graveguard not buffed at all, the enemy has to respect that because they'll take out a 5-man unit. They'll take out a comparable unit pretty easy. And if nothing else, they can go in and put some hurt on, bigger, tougher units, or at least tie them up. I think that block of 10, 20, or 30 are all viable, and I think 20 is the sweet spot. So if you want to run a couple blocks of 10 just behind your lines to give you a little bit more punch, I think that's fine. Just be warned that, you probably get some of them shot off, maybe a spell or two will hit them. A block of 20, I think, is the sweet spot, because a block of 20 is like you have enough killing, and if you lose 4 or 5, you still got a lot of killing. I heard a lot of people that like to take a block of 30, and that's totally viable as well. Maybe instead of taking 220s, you take 130, and that way, if 5 or 10 get killed, they are still there, and they can do everything. The only thing I will say that I don't like about a block of 30 is they get a little unwieldy, just for your bubbles and your synergy, having enough screens in front of them, stuff like that. So that's the only thing to keep in consideration when running a 30 block, that you're investing a lot of points. And if you're bringing 30, you probably need some kind of buffs. I mean, you don't really need it, but you're probably thinking along those lines, like, how do I want to buff this? How do I want to make it better? So just remember that you're going to have to be moving this around between terrain, over terrain. There'll be fights going on, so it gets a little unwieldy with that many models. All right, so many ways to buff them in the book, but they do find unbuffed, and there's more ways than what I've even covered in here to buff these guys and make them better. Manfred has abilities, Radikar, Coven Throne. There's just so many ways you can dig through and find things to make summonable better. All those things work on these guys. Great weapons win out in my opinion, but shields do have a place. I feel that if you're more, if you're trying to do some defensive build, maybe, personally me, I just had the models with shields forever, so I ran them a few times, and they're still good. They still do a great job. I just think with raw damage output, that 2 damage on them is very nice. You want to screen these guys. Zombie screens, even a wolf screen, skeleton warrior screens, because you don't want them getting hit first. You want to set these guys up. They're kind of like a chess piece, and you want to make sure that you get the charge that you want. You want to get your buffs up in time, and you want to make sure that they're fighting first and doing the damage, because they can literally take out units. But if they get swung on first, or if the enemy makes a charge into them, that can be issues. That can be problems. Okay, so make sure you're screening them correctly and using them right. You can have them come out of the grave and work without buffs, and it's an option. So occasionally, especially in the last tournament, I had blocks of 20, and there was times when I said, I'm going to put them in a grave and let them come out in the backboard. It's totally viable. The enemy has to respect that. It isn't like, okay, you're going to pop up 10 zombies over here, or your half depleted unit of skeletons or whatever. 20 Graveguard that appear in someone's backfield is very scary. You can also do some things with movement. So you can actually put them in the grave, and set your graves in a way that if you're going first, or you have a good suspicion, you can have them pop up, halfway through the board, and have zombies pop up in front of them and actually have a screen and them set, and then fly your vampires or run your vampires up behind them to have those buffs. So that's a way to get around their slow movement. Just have them come out of the grave from the get-go. Because that's really the biggest detriment you're sort of working around, is their slow movement, and figuring out ways to sort of to deal with that and handle it is how it's going to make you successful with them. Finally, we're looking at unit rating. It's an A plus. Almost any list could benefit from a unit or two, and that's even if you're running cavalry. If you want something to sit on a back line that's actually scary, got a little punch, you can throw these guys in there. Great weapons are in most ways better than shields, in my opinions. So there you have it. One of the best units in the book. I don't want to call them very versatile, but they just do what they do really well. They can put out damage, and they don't survive super well. They're not the tankiest thing in the whole Age of Sigmar game, but they do come back. So a unit of 20 is going to come back as 10, and that is honestly still a threat. That's all I got for this Warscroll review. Thanks for watching, and y'all be good.